Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. Well, today is sort of a bit of a first impressions, a bit of a review, a bit of a side-by-side comparison. And it is of the 38mm version of the SeaGull 1963 chronograph featuring the sapphire crystal. Now, some months ago, quite a few months ago now, I bought and owned and enjoyed the 40mm variation of this watch, and I bought that one because I like that size on my wrist. However, I had a little bit of a problem with it. The problem was the lug to lug. The lugs were just quite large, and it meant that the watch sat on my wrist a little bit strangely. Well, not how exactly that I liked it. In particular, how the band sat on my wrist, or how it didn't sit on my wrist, which is the problem. And when I sold that watch, I knew that I wanted to buy the 38mm variation. Today, obviously, I have bought it. I've got that in my collection at the moment. I'm still deciding whether I want to keep it or not, but today I'm going to flip the camera around and I'm going to show you some old footage from my 40mm review, as well as the watch that I have now. Now guys, if you are interested in this watch, if you're interested in one of the case sizes, I am going to leave an affiliate link down below to this particular watch from the store that I paid my own money for. They are 260 Australian dollars at the moment on this store from AliExpress, and that link there will be one of those affiliate links. I do certainly appreciate it if you choose to use it. If you do, I'm going to earn a tiny little bit of commission. And guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do click on that subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. It's the quickest, easiest, and freest way to support me and this channel. But let's flip the camera around now and let's check out this 38mm SeaGull 1963, as well as some side-by-side footage of my 40mm variation that I had sometime in the past. Okay, let's flip the camera around and let's check out these watches. Now guys, this is the SeaGull 1963 in the 38mm and the sapphire crystal. Now at the time of filming this, it is winter in Australia and it is raining today. If you can hear some noise in the background, I do apologise for that. Not much I can do. There's no point waiting for it to stop raining, otherwise this video will never happen. But first, I just want to show you how the watch arrives in the packaging. It comes in this nice little pelican case, nice and secure. It comes on the the double NATO strap, but also comes with a leather strap as well. Now you will see as I'm showing you this, the packaging and the bits and pieces are still on this watch. This one is brand new, straight out of the box. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to be keeping the watch or not, and because of that, and because I need to be aware of money in regards to buying and selling watches, I'm going to leave the packaging on for the purpose of this particular video. So what else do we get in the packaging besides a leather strap? Well, we get the little pack with the cloth, a card which includes the warranty, and a few little bits and pieces, what we sort of expect from sort of AliExpress packaging nowadays. And what are my thoughts about this watch compared to the 40mm that I owned for quite some time before I sold it? Well, firstly, it is obviously a little bit smaller, a little bit chunkier. It feels like a little bit more of a nugget, I guess. I'm not really sure how else to explain that. It doesn't feel quite as large, which is exactly what you'd expect from a 38mm watch versus a 40mm watch. But overall, the quality is just as good, just as clean, just as nice. I absolutely love those blue hands on that champagne dial, all those sub-registries as well. It is the classically good-looking 1963. But what are the dimensions of this one, and what are they compared to the 40mm? And that's more what I want to be talking about today, more than just a sort of a re-review of the same watch in a different size. I want to talk about the differences, similarities, and what I like about this one versus the 40mm, or what I like about the 40mm versus this 38mm. Well, I'm going to put some footage from my old review up here on the left. So let's talk about the differences in the sizes. Well, the 40mm was obviously a 40mm case diameter. This one here, even though they say it is a 38mm, between there and there, it's actually around about 37.5mm. So it's even slightly smaller. Thickness of this one is pretty much exactly the same as the 40mm. There is about a 0.1mm of difference. This one is 13.8mm wide, whereas the 40mm is a 13.7mm wide. But the biggest difference and the biggest change and the biggest reason why I considered buying this one over the 40mm is the lug to lug, because the lug to lug on that one there is quite large. It is 50.3mm. And not just a 50.3mm being big, it just feels large because it is quite flat. And you'll even see on this one, it is actually relatively quite flat. But the lug to lug on this one, much nicer, sits on wrist much better. It is 47 millimeters. Now, the lug on this one is 18 millimeters, which is rather small, but obviously it's not a particularly large watch, so that's about right. It sort of seems to fit, especially this sort of style, whereas the 40 millimeter version, it is 20 millimeters. Now, obviously I sold the 40 millimeter version, even though I probably like that size of case better than this size of case, and the main reason for that was that lug to lug, especially how it sat on wrist. The one on the left there, the 40 millimeter, it sat a little bit funny. But why did I sell that 40 millimeter, and why have I purchased this one with the possibility of keeping this one longer term? Well, it is that lug to lug. That 40 millimeter sat a little bit strangely on wrist. Now let's get rid of that one and let's jump into this watch more specifically. The 40 millimeter on my wrist sat so wide that the band sort of fell away from my wrist, and it looked a bit funny. When you're looking down on my wrist, it sort of literally just fell straight down from it. And that was really the only thing that I disliked about the watch, because it was a beautiful looking watch. I liked that case diameter, but it just sat funny on the wrist. And I don't like a watch when it sits with the band falling straight down from my wrist. I want to see a little bit of the band curve around, sort of curve away from the case and sit nicely on my wrist, so it gives you a little bit more of a profile of the watch as well as the band as well. To sit like that was just a little bit funny, and it was the reason that I ended up selling it. But this one here, obviously having the smaller lug to lug, I'm assuming it's going to fit better on my wrist. Let's check it out. Now, as you can see on my 6 3/4 inch wrist, you can actually see the strap now. The other one, it fell away to a point where it sort of looked like that, and it just felt a bit funny on wrist. I didn't dislike the watch. It was a lovely watch. Just like this one, it's also a lovely watch, but it just sat a little bit funny, and I didn't really enjoy that experience with it, which is why I ended up selling it. So why do I think this one is perhaps the better watch? Well, I'm actually not sure if it is actually the better watch. I think they are very, very similar, obviously being the same style of watch, having the same similar positivities to them, including that beautiful case back, which I'll stick a picture there of that sort of see-through case back showing the beautiful SeaGull movement there. But the negatives of it was that strange fit to the wrist. And I think realistically, for that 40 millimeter case diameter version to sit nicely on somebody's wrist, I would really recommend it for people with over a 7.5 inch wrist. That way it would actually sit nicer on wrist. Below 7.5, below 7.25 inch wrist perhaps, I'd actually go for the 38 millimeter version. I think it sits better on wrist. Plus, being this sort of style of watch, being this sort of vintage inspired watch, certainly recreating a watch from the 1960s in China, this sort of size feels a little bit more correct, more sort of appropriate for the style of the watch. But is there any negatives of this one? Is there anything that I don't like? Well, I have to say the watch itself, there's actually very little that I dislike. It is exactly what I expected from this particular watch. It is very, very well made. That smaller size certainly does fit nicer on wrist. You've got that absolutely beautiful see-through case back showing off that movement, which is absolutely brilliant and beautiful. It is really, really pleasant to have that in a collection, just having the look of that in collection. However, probably similar to the 40 millimeter version, obviously not including that lug to lug issue. The only thing that I actually don't particularly love about it is the straps that come with it. They don't quite fit my wrist anyway. I think this sort of NATO style is definitely something that does suit the watch itself. However, as you saw, there wasn't actually enough room on it for me and for my 6 3/4 inch wrist. So even if you had a fairly small wrist, much smaller than mine, this NATO is probably not the one you're going to end up using. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to buy one of these, you're most likely going to be swapping out the strap, which is not a big negative by any means for any watch, swapping out a strap. You can then get something that suits you better, fits you better, and perhaps is a little bit more of your style. And what are my final thoughts then? What are my final thoughts about the 38 versus the 40? Well, I personally prefer the 38 millimeter. I think it fits the look of the watch a little bit better, but mostly it fits my wrist a lot better. If you do have a much larger wrist, go the 40. If you have a medium or a smaller wrist, go the 38. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I always do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to check out my videos. I hope to see you in another one very soon.